So you got into the college of your dreams, and tell us more. What happened?
Okay, I didn't know how that information got anyway. Jai Bhim sabhi ko. Yeah, I was at College of Dreams was LSR. So I was at LSR. I wouldn't like. I feel like most of the people here would be also from DU. Um, yeah, so I come from coastal Andhra Pradesh, and I never knew what LSR was until I decided that I wanted to journalism, which is not possible from where I live in. So I was just looking for random colleges, and then I came across this name called Delhi University. I didn't know what Delhi University was really, honestly. And then so I thought like okay, I'll just give it a try, and then I had to go to internet cyber cafe. I went there, and the registration fees was 100 rupees, and I didn't have that. So the person who handles the cyber cafe paid for my registration fee. That's how I got through LSR. And okay, despite that. I mean, LSR has been quite a roller coaster sort of journey where I discovered a lot of things, and also my mental health was worsened to a maximum level at this university for various reasons. So one being the campus being hostile towards people from marginalized sections, and also people being obnoxious to intersections, right? So I was hoping that because it's a college which speaks about feminism to its breadth, so I thought it's going to be a good space where I can, assert my identity as a woman from lower caste community. But that actually backfired, and also the first thing you will listen when you go to LSR is that we come from a place where it's either mess or canteen. So when we say that LSR, people will correct you saying, oh no, it's cafe, it's not canteen, right? So that was the first thing, like the first orientation day was that. That's what I heard. Like when I said, where's the canteen? Someone said, it's cafe. So I think that explains the rest of my journey at LSR, and where also people repeatedly will point that you come from a reserved category, you cannot speak English well, or you have an accent that because I'm from South, and you don't wear fab India clothes, or stuff like that is very much frequent. I'm not even exaggerating. I think I'm saying it to the 100% lower level than what it is in real. Um, so yeah, and you know how it would be in that space, right? So I survived my first year being alone, and it was not easy because you start questioning yourself. So I thought I'm not good at language. I thought I'm not good at studies. Basically, I thought I was a failure, right? But like second year, and the end of second year, when I started meeting people who are from again other marginalized sections, they are also going through the same. But then we like sat and we used to read together. We used to do our own things together. Then we realized that it's not our mistake, right? So we have our own language. We have our own like we wouldn't have been there if we were a failure, right? So, and that's when we thought, like, I think we struggled more than anyone else to be there. So that's sort of a assertion that came out because of the community that I was able to, manage to find. But I feel it's a privilege that I found that community, and others still don't in the campus. And it's the same with every other college in India where institutional casteism is upfront and we don't see it, right? And even professors spew casteism in the class through the references they give. Like nobody talks about my leaders. My leaders are Savitri Bai Phule. My leaders is Fatima Sheikh, because of whom all the women here are studying, right? They are the ones who opened the schools in India. So I've never read about them, and I'm reading about these Western feminists and nothing about the regional leaders who actually were the reason. So there was a disillusionment, but yeah, I managed to find my community, which is sort of liberating. But I also ended up being in a very bad place mentally. So it's a mixed feeling about LSR.
Tell us about Blue Dawn, what you do with that and what you started.
Okay. So Blue Dawn is comes the name Blue Dawn comes out of so the blue color represents anti-caste politics, which basically is about a social justice movement. So the Blue Dawn is a mental health organization. We are major. We look at mental health through social justice lens, and we believe that until and unless we achieve social justice, we can't reach this mental health liberation. So we also focus on community liberation through that, and how I got there was also because of another institute that I joined post my graduation, which is Tata Institute, where I think like half of people again are from there. So it's again the same, like it never ends. It's a cycle where you go because these universities are occupied by certain section, and who are also who does not want to see that there is a structural oppression that exists. So at this it went beyond caste. It went to the extent of sexuality and gender as well, right? So it started getting worse, and then I couldn't like manage to continue. And then that's when I felt like alone, and I was in search of a community again, and I couldn't find that. That's where this idea of having our own support group came from. So I thought like, okay, this is me, and there are like and so I dropped out, and with me I think 3-4 others also dropped out. And across departments, many people dropped. Like if you see the dropout rate of these universities and see the caste locations or social locations of these people who drop out, it's the highest number is from SC, ST, OBC, and DNT students, right? So that's when it clicked like why it is happening, and that's when I thought like we need our own space, we need our own safe space, and we started off as a support group, and today we also facilitate mental health services. And we started taking workshops, and we are getting there. Hopefully, yeah, we'll.
And there have been times I worked for 365 days, 4 years. Believe me, I could not go for birth of my son while sitting here. 20 days I did not go. But never had a mental stress. So it is stepping back as to why the workload should cause mental stress. And that is the one to be addressed. Not the medicines and, that is much later.
If we speak about stereotypes, this is the biggest stereotype that mental health is an individual's problem and that we don't want to come out of it. Honestly, it doesn't feel good to sit and not being able to get out of the bed. It doesn't feel good, and we don't want that too. It's just that the systems that we live in, the structures that are placed in this country, or any structure for that matter, makes us feel that. Like if you're talking about corporate sector, the sectors, the problem is with the sector, but not the individual that is experiencing the stress. And if we talk about a student who is dropping out, the problem is with the college that is doing whatever injustice that is doing, for that matter, institutional casteism, or cutting off their scholarships and financial aids. And if you talk about the children, and why are we looking at them as bullies and not that there might be a problem with the families being dysfunctional, or the society treating them differently because they come from a certain social location, or they're underprivileged, or for that matter they're experiencing the world differently because their environment around them is not as rosy as everyone or every other person has. It's just that all of us are various different individuals. For example, I am here as Divya. I am also someone who lives with certain illness. I am also someone who runs an organization, but I am also someone who is daughter of a mother who had gone through some other illnesses, right? I'm also a sister who has certain responsibilities. So there are so many intersectionalities within me. As a woman also, I'm not just a woman, right? I have certain sexuality, I have certain caste, I have certain religion. So there are so many intersectionalities and structures that affect my mental health. And honestly, I didn't choose this. Honestly, I didn't want to be here. I should not be here and speaking these things. I think it's about the gaze that we look at people with mental illnesses, right? We think that that's their problem and they don't want to come out of it, that they are lazy. I feel it's high time that we reverse this gaze and think about what is causing mental health, what are the reasons, and change those structures. Basically, achieve social justice for everyone, and that is when we can talk about okay, there is no one with mental health issues.
As someone who works on the intersections of identities, as on the identities of caste, gender, and academia and language, as a woman, someone with a mental illness, would you please tell us a bit about the challenges and frustrations that are unique to your position?
First basic challenge as we speak, talking about the language. What is the language of mental health that exists in our country? We have the language that's not Indian per se. We have the language that's been taken from Western countries, right? Some white, now bred people made some document and said that okay, this is called this. If someone has these symptoms, they fall into this disorder, right? So it's not what, like, I don't know how to explain things like bipolar or borderline personality disorder, stuff like that in my own mother tongue, which is Telugu, and I don't know how to speak about that to my mother, right? So the language in itself is very exclusionary in nature, and that's where the problem also lies. But let us also, I also feel that the communities that I work with and I am from, we have our own language too, right? We have been living these many days and we do communicate in our own languages. And I think that is where it's, as social workers or community workers and mental health professionals, that's where our duty lies to break that hegemony and bring in the language of mental health, which is intersectional in nature and to everyone. That's the biggest challenge that exists, and the bigger than that is the, like, okay, for example, we don't know what, I didn't know what therapy and counseling meant until my fourth semester, which is second year ending in LSA. That also I got to know because there's a counseling center in the college. I only knew that it's called counseling center, and I thought it's something like a personality development thing, because I never heard what counseling was. Okay, later when I graduated, I got to know what things are like, because I was taken to doctors, psychiatrists, and three of them met me for 10 minutes each, and three of them gave me three different labels, or you call diagnosis. So I didn't know which to believe in. So of course I googled, right? And then on Google I read three different things about three of these names that I was put under, and then this started some placebo effect. I didn't know that I was that. So after that I started noticing things, or I was doing those things, maybe I didn't know. So that was also there. I think I just derailed, but coming back to that, the challenge is that the mental health professionals in our country also need to be intersectional in approach, right? For example, right now with Blue Dawn, what we do is we are trying to organize more and more trainings that explain the sociological perspective of mental health to the mental health professionals. Because if I am going to a mental health professional who is telling me that I am weak and or I need to do more hard work when I say that my friends are bullying me because I come from reservation. It's not my mistake, it's their caste bias, right? So the therapists need to tell me that okay, caste prejudice exists, and you are here because you worked hard. It doesn't mean that you have to improve yourself, right? So that language also need to change with respect to mental health professionals, and at policy level there needs to be a bigger. I think the recent Mental Health Act is a hope that we all are like keeping in, which decriminalizes suicide and many other things.
I think each one of us has problems, dealing with day-to-day triggers, and they're everywhere. Even though you try your best to be your, best self, but these triggers are there and they just break you down. I just want to know, like, how do you deal with these? I mean, they're trivial things, but they get the worst out of you. I mean, so how do you deal with it?
I would say that I just find my, I would not call it peace. I don't think I can ever, like we all can ever be peaceful. But it's just that the daily acceptance that we live with this situation, and sometimes it is okay if you can't get out of the bed, and sometimes it's a big task even if you get out of the bed and take a bath, right? So basically not looking at, this is just for myself, I'm no expert. So what I do is I don't like look at doing things according to the, as she mentioned, in terms of capitalistic world, this productivity angle. For me, there were days where, well, like for example, this week I've been in Bangalore, Bombay, and Delhi within a span of 4 or 5 days, right? And I've been doing things. And I'm sure I know that day after tomorrow I won't be able to get out of the bed as well. So there are ups and downs, and it's just that everything is equal for me. If I'm sitting here and talking here is same as me trying to get out of my bed and drink some water and or at least go take bath. So basically I just look at all these things in the same plane, not as like something is big and something is not. And the other thing that helps is community healing and the community liberation that comes. And community is something which one can define for themselves. For me, some community is something where I can feel I can say that I'm feeling vulnerable, and also where I feel safe, right? So for me it's been an online community actually, where I'm constantly like talking to someone who would understand my lived experience by not dismissing them. um, so that helps me on daily basis.